Excellent. So once again, welcome everybody to today's Roads to Research session that Gwen and I will be leading. This is an update on tri-agency funding coming out of the National Conference of the Canadian Association of Research Administrators conference. I said that twice. We move to the traditional lands welcome. And just before we start that, I'd also like to acknowledge that this session is made possible through the Research Support Fund funded by the tri-agencies.
I am Ron Sam, elected Chief of Songhees Nation. I want to acknowledge that Royal Roads University rests upon the ancestral lands of Kosamson and Lekwungen families, now known as the Esquimalt and Songhees peoples. Our ancestors once resided on the shores where Snakwa the Blue Heron House, is located now. That's where our families gathered and harvested off the land. We welcomed guests and hosted them with great respect. As you begin your day, take a moment to acknowledge the rich history this land has. Hashka Siyam.
CARA is the Canadian Association of Research Administrators. This is made up of about 1,000 people across the country from universities, colleges, research and teaching hospitals. They cover all gamuts of research administration from pre-award, proposal development, post-award financial and monitoring, and increasingly the communication of research and research results to the community, and that idea of how is research making a difference. Right now we are I guess extra fortunate in that I am the current president of the Canadian Association of Research Administrators, and the board includes members from each of the three councils, from SHRC, from Anserk, from CIHR, as well as somebody from the CRC Secretariat and from the Canada Foundation for Innovation. So we have that, that additional opportunity to have a voice at that table and have their ear. Within our office, our staff attend the national and regional conferences, and the research administrators across the country are a very sharing group, in that if you send an email and say we're looking at developing X policy, they will usually send you a link to theirs or any information about issues they had. So we have a pretty tight-knit community. So at the conference in May, there was some updates from the agencies, and so we thought we would share those with each of you. So we'll cover the funding stats from the Insight program, changes that are upcoming to tri-agency programs, some updated information on research data management and equity, diversity, and inclusion, SHRC's new thematic areas, and some new funding programs. So the 2018-19 funding stats for the Insight program, and so there's a number of you here that are looking at an Insight this fall. That's an October 15th deadline. There's been more funding put in for these competitions, and you can see that after a steady decline, the success rates are going up, and the projected success rates into the future are around that 50% is what SHRC is hoping for. We have actually done very well. Sorry, this is the Insight Development Grants. I messed that up.
It's okay.
Insight Development Grants are a February call. Again, for the Insights, we have been really fortunate in our success rates have been about the same as the national average. Rob holds one right now. Ash holds one. And then there is the Insight Grants,
Yeah,
which is you.
The difference between the Insight and the Insight Development Grant, I think, comes up a fair bit. So the Insight Development Grant is an earlier stage, it's a development stage of a research project. And then the Insight Grant covers a longer period of time. So the projected success rates are actually the same, a little bit higher for the Insight Development Grants than they are for the Insight Grants. But these are the ones that are coming up October 15th. So if you would like to apply, we would probably want to get started in August. What's new in the Insight Grants over the last 3 years or so is that we now have 2 streams, and the success rate is a lot higher for Stream A. So they're the same amount of time. The major difference is how much funding is allotted, so the size of the project that you want to do. So we do have higher success, small institutions have higher success rates in Stream A than Stream B, and I think that that's been the same for Royal Roads. I think we're about 28%. The connection program is our next one to talk about. So these two fall under different umbrellas. There's the Insight program, which houses the Insight Development Grant, and the Insight Grant, because SSHRC likes to name things all the same to confuse you.
Which they did.
And then, and then this falls under the connection program. We will then talk about the partnership program, which houses 3 grants. Connection houses 2. So within the connection grants, there are 2 types that you can apply for. There's an event, which is a conference or a workshop or a working group. And then there's an outreach activity, which can be publications, video dissemination, anything that would have outreach but not an actual event date. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Everybody with me? Okay. Awesome. So these are the success rates up till now and the predicted success rates. And you can, I don't know if this, you can really see it on here, but we as a country have averaged about 60% success rate over the last 6 years. Back to you.
So the third sort of stream of funding from SSHRC is the partnership program, and there are 3 different types of partnership awards. So there is the Partnership Engage Grant, which is a small grant meant to be a seed grant to help develop a partnership. There's a very high success rate in them of 57% in the last. We've submitted a partnership engage, and we were successful with it for Rob Newell last year, and that's the first one that we have submitted for. So these, you can often think about the partnership grants as you start with a partnership engage, then you move to a partnership development, and then a full partnership. And they increase both in complexity and in size and length of funding as you move up. So the partnership development grants can be for a new partnership, or they can be to further the development of a partnership. They are very exploratory. They are shorter in length. They are up to 2 years. And the success rates are sort of generally kind of under that 40%, but they are looking to hopefully increase them with additional funding. And the third opportunity under the partnerships grant is a full partnership grant, which winds up with a letter of intent that happens in February. If you're successful with the letter of intent, it's usually about a $20,000 seed fund to pull the team together and do a full proposal, which is due in the fall. These can run up to, is it 2.5 million? Over the life of the project. And for those who have been in the SSHRC world for a long time, these used to be the Community University Research Alliance grants, the CURAs. And when they changed, when they redid things at SSHRC, these became the partnership grants.
And there's one more program coming up that we will talk about later on, because I'm going to talk about CIHR and Anserk. And I see one person who will be interested in that. So we're going to talk about the new SSHRC program later to keep you here. So this is what's new with CIHR. It's interesting. Stay with me. So we don't have funding statistics from CIHR because they don't provide them except upon request, which I believe is something that the new president of CARA is going to mention to them. They are currently conducting a national survey on priority areas, and researchers from all disciplines are invited to participate in that survey. I would really encourage you to, if you can. It's on the CIHR homepage. It's fairly prominent, and it's a really great way to have your voice heard in Canadian funding environment. There are some changes to how they're going to be doing their CVs for knowledge users, which is the sort of CIHR collaborator that can be a community member or a non-government organization representative. So they're not going to have to provide academic level CVs, which previously they had. The last thing, sorry. New CIHR admin guide, that's going to be coming out this summer. We will share that out once we see it. We haven't seen a draft, but we'll put it in the Research Services e-bulletin, so watch your inboxes for that.
Do you expect any meaningful changes?
They have retired 2 of their programs and launched a new one, as well as a supplement to their program or project grants, which is their big one. So they did a fairly huge consultation that ended in 2018. They're doing another one now. I do think they're looking to make change, but I have no idea what it's going to look like. Yeah. So Anserk. Anserk.
Matt, this is for you.
They have changed the time frame for the early career researchers. Anserk has historically had a much shorter allowance for how long you can be considered early in career. They've now changed that to 5 years to align with the rest of the tri-agencies. They have launched a discovery, called the Discovery Launch Supplement, and it's a small pot of money that will allow you to develop a discovery grant. So it's a bit like that staged partnership program, but for the discovery grants program. So they're moving to look a little bit more like the way programs are shaped in the rest of the tri-agencies. They have new chairs for women in science and engineering. They are regional programs, so per province and territory. They're approved for 5 years and renewable for an additional 5 years. And so Anserk is kind of administratively leading the equity, diversity, and inclusion work for the tri-agency. And what they have done for their applications is they have embedded, they've placed a requirement to embed how you address equity, diversity, and inclusion in each section of the application rather than as a separate piece. So if and when you do apply, we'll help with that. It's particularly affecting the what's HQP, highly qualified personnel sections. And I do have just a quick overview of their statistics. So they still have higher success rates for established researchers. So that's what they're looking to move that mark a little bit more towards early career.
So in the past year, there have been a number of changes that are happening across the board for the tri-agency programs. So one of them is, and we did have an application go in, there was a partnership between SSHRC and CMHC for training awards. Parental leave coverage is going to shift from 6 months to 12 months. So if people are looking at having postdocs or having research assistants on their grants, or if somebody is looking, who holds a grant, is looking at a parental leave, that will be there. The CRCC, which is an interagency committee, is looking at priorities and associated changes, supporting early career researchers, EDI being integrated into all policies and programs. The CRCC, which is the sort of the Canadian Canada Research Coordinating Committee, which spans all 3, is also looking at some work with Indigenous communities and an interdisciplinary Indigenous research and research training model. And the other big change is the NFREF, the New Frontiers for Research Funding. And so that is a new program that crosses the 3 councils. Projects must be what they consider high risk, and that doesn't mean high risk in the same way that we might consider high risk. It's more high risk in that they are projects that cannot fit in existing streams for any of the councils. They have to be interdisciplinary, and the councils now allow interdisciplinary, especially SSHRC. They have a multi-interdisciplinary review committee. So it needs to be a project that truly crosses disciplines and could not be funded. And so one example, this was one of the things that they talked about when we were at the conference. So let's say that you had an historian, and they were going to be looking at whatever topic, let's say it was around women's issues in business or something through history, and you had a historian and you had somebody from women's studies. It's probable that that is a project that would fit under the existing Insight or Insight Development Grant framework. And so even though it's interdisciplinary, it would not be considered under the NFREF. If, however, you had, say, somebody from the natural sciences looking at earthquakes and somebody from social sciences looking at community consultations and community development within that, that is something that doesn't fit under either. And so that is something more that would be funded under the NFREF. The NFREF will have about a 10% success rate, and it is a 3-stage process. There is a notice of intent that goes in August this year. Then there is a letter of intent that goes in September. If you are invited at the letter of intent stage to move forward, then you do a full proposal, which will be due in December. Last year, in the inaugural competition for the NFREF, they had 1,700 LOIs go in. 1,300 were invited to move forward, and I think there were about 130 awards. This year, they are looking at similar kind of statistics with about 1,000 LOIs that will be invited to go forward, and the funding of about 100 applications. So it will not be above that 10%. They're very, very highly competitive. What is nice is that in this competition, in the exploration competition, which is open now, there is a focus on early career researchers. And last year it was restricted to early career researchers. This year they will put the proportionate amount of money that is, so if 70% of the people that apply are early career researchers, then 70% of the funds will go to early career researchers. So that's kind of a nice piece. Research data management is another key issue for the tri-agencies, and they have delayed their national policy on research data management just because they're finding more complexities with it. But when that does come into place, institutions will have about 6 months to come up with a research data management strategy and then associated policies and procedures from that. And there will also be a requirement to address research data management in applications. Tamara and Will are both working on gathering a considerable amount of data from a number of our faculty about the data that is typical for Royal Roads. They're looking at with those, and they can probably speak to this more than I can, but so if I get this wrong, just go double face palm. Looking at the type of data that we gather, looking at issues around anonymity and confidentiality, looking at issues of if that data is made public, how can that be made public? How does it get tagged? How does it get stored? How does it get used? And I believe that they have some data sets from people like Matt and a couple of others possibly to kind of play around with and explore. And then when they're done with that, they will send forward a whole list of recommendations and ideas for Rosie and I. And from that, we'll look at then building the strategy for the institution. So thank you to you both for all that work that you're doing to help us with this. At this point, no, for the RDM. Yet. But the whole sort of aspect of that is the tri-agencies believe that if it is data that is gathered with public money, then there is a need to have that data available for others.
I think what does extend to students is the new maternity leave policies, so that might be worth looking into.
Before we go on to what those changes are, there's one other big change with Anserk, and that is that the whole partnerships piece with Anserk, which have been a whole host of about a dozen different types of awards, is now all coalesced on what they're calling the Alliance Program. And the Alliance Program allows for different types of applications and rolling deadlines, so that instead of 6 or 8 different ones through the year, this is what you can apply for, and it can happen anytime.
Okay, so how this will look when we're actually crafting applications and programs of research. So in terms of planning a program of research, what we're going to try and encourage everyone to look at a little bit more is the inclusion of postdocs and MyTax students. So as an institution, we're really, really well placed for MyTax, and if you are funded under a tri-agency grant, your student who wants to work on the same project as you through MyTax for their thesis, dissertation, major project, whatever research they're doing, they skip the review stage with MyTax. So they are automatically approved for funding if they're working on a SHRC-funded or tri-agency funded project. Normally, the normal MyTax review is 3 weeks, 4 weeks, but it's nice to know that you're going to have a funded student. What else? For the program of research. And we're going to talk about this in a minute here, but just to also look at where your research fits into the funders' themes and strategic areas. So that's definitely a message that we got really clearly at Montreal is that people are not identifying their fit with what the funding agency is looking for. So we're going to try and work a bit more towards that. That wasn't specific to Royal Roads, that was general.
Ours are perfect.
Of course. And then when you're developing proposals, think about how you can support equity, diversity, and inclusion, and whether that's how you will reach out to diverse audiences, how your teams are intentionally built to consider equity, diversity, and inclusion, as well as in the language that you use to write the proposal. And we can definitely help with that last one. Less so with the first two, so that's, but it's something that we will remind you of at a proposal stage. So speaking of the proposal stage, the EDI sections of those proposals are not where you talk about the diversity of who you are, who your research team is, although in the student level you can talk about how you intend to recruit RAs. But they are to talk about the institutional philosophy around equity, diversity, and inclusion. And it's something that we Research Services, HR, and the new President's Steering Committee is working on right now, so we will have some more. We're not going to have standard text, but we will have language to include that's specific to each application. Mm-hmm.
So the first meeting of the President's EDI committee is happening tomorrow.
That's right.
It's happening as we speak. And EDI was identified as one of the 6 or 7 key salient themes for the university to work on into the future as part of the visioning and consultation process, which you'll hear more about.
Intentional research data management. All proposals submitted to the agencies should include methodologies that reflect best practices in research data management. That's a direct quote. So they have best practices identified for each agency, and it's worth reviewing when you develop a proposal. Okay, so these are the new thematic areas. I cannot give you a lot of detail on them because there are 16 of them. So there were 6 from 2014 to 2017. These 16 replaced that, and the foresight on societal futures is sort of the overarching theme, but as a theme, it's really broad. So there are summary reports from the initial 6 future challenge areas, and those are form the work of researchers across the country. We held 3 or 4 of them here at this institution, so you can find the reports that were done on each of those 6 knowledge areas have been amalgamated and are available on the tri-agency website, CRC website, and SHRC's website. So these are thematic areas. They are not evaluation criteria, and they don't offer additional or dedicated research funding aside from the knowledge synthesis grants, which are coming back, should be this year. So we have upcoming 3 consecutive years worth of knowledge synthesis grants that have been announced, and they are Living Within the Earth's Carrying Capacity, Working in the Digital Economy, and the Emerging Asocial Society. Those are going to be due in the fall of each year. And we haven't seen the call for this year yet. So it's going to be a fairly tight one. So the first one is, again, living within the Earth's carrying capacity. So if anyone wants to get started on that, we will watch for it, because we're almost in August already. And before we go to questions, I just wanted to remind anybody who has held a tri-agency grant that you are eligible to be a reviewer, and it's a wonderful opportunity and you learn a lot, and we're happy to help.